Hi, my name is Tasha Clark and I'm the Title IX Coordinator at Texas A&M University-Kingsville. The presentation today is going to cover sex-based discrimination, your reporting options, the administrative process, and required training that you need to complete during your first semester. When we refer to sex-based discrimination, we're discussing incidents of sexual harassment, sexual assault, which is our term for rape, sexual exploitation, dating violence, domestic violence, stalking based on sex, gender discrimination, and related retaliation. It's really important that we have this conversation with all of our students before they're on campus because we want all of our students to be aware that we take all reports of sex-based discrimination seriously. And if there is a finding of responsibility, it may result in sanctions. We also want all of our students to be aware of their reporting options and possible supportive measures that may be available so that the university can support those students should they need access to these resources.
What do we know about sexual misconduct on college campuses throughout the United States? We know that 1 in 5 women and 1 in 16 men will report being sexually assaulted while in college. Those are very high numbers, so part of my job to reduce sexual misconduct at TAMUC is to provide prevention and awareness training opportunities. You'll see me at student health and wellness events as well as sponsoring other events related to Title IX. It's also important to know that among college women, 9 out of 10 reported that they knew the person who assaulted them. There's often a misconception with sexual assaults that it's committed by a stranger, by someone lurking in the shadows or hiding behind the bushes. And while that can and does occur, most of the time sexual assaults are committed by someone you know. Maybe it's a friend of a friend or an acquaintance. It's important to have that awareness on campus. We also want you to be aware that 60% of sexual assaults that are reported on college campuses across the United States are reported to occur in on-campus housing. If you think about it, there are lots of doors with locks and lots of ways to isolate people in student housing. I want you to be aware that your community advisors and your resident advisors receive annual training on how to handle reports of sexual misconduct and can aid you in obtaining resources. Last, it's important to note that 90% of acquaintance rapes are reported to have involved alcohol. In fact, most of the sexual misconduct that is reported to the Office of Compliance includes incidents where alcohol was involved. It's important to have an understanding of some of the myths associated with alcohol as well as how it can impact the body. We have an alcohol EDU training that is available online for all of our students that may provide some valuable insight. What is the law? Well, Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 prohibits sex discrimination in educational programs and activities. So what that means is that for Title IX to apply, there needs to be an allegation of sexual harassment, which is unwelcome conduct on the basis of sex, of a sexual nature or otherwise. This could be quid pro quo by an employee, and when we're talking about quid pro quo, we're referring to behavior that is this for that, where somebody's leveraging their position of power to make others feel like that they are required to submit to unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, or other verbal, nonverbal, or physical conduct of a sexual nature. And that they feel like that they have to submit because if they reject these behaviors, it could result in an adverse educational or employment action. It can also be conduct that is severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive, that it denies equal access to a program or activity that is being conducted through the university. Or it can be sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, or stalking based on sex. Now at TAMUC, we also have another policy that will cover other incidents of sex-based discrimination that does not fall under Title IX sexual harassment. And this is our sex-based misconduct policy. The key components of the sex-based misconduct policy are unwelcome conduct on the basis of sex that is severe, persistent, or pervasive enough to create a work, education, or campus living environment that a reasonable person would consider intimidating, abusive, or offensive. This can include, but is not limited to, sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, stalking based on sex, and sexual exploitation. It is important that all of our students are aware that they need to obtain consent for the sexual activity that they are going to engage in. You obtain consent through clear, voluntary, and ongoing words or actions that create mutually understandable permissions for the activity. You want to make sure that your partner is actively participating, because if they are passively laying there, there is a good sign that you do not have consent. There's a saying that you want your partner enthusiastic when consenting to be sure that there isn't an element of uncertainty. You do need consent for each sexual act, from kissing to touching to removing clothes and different sexual acts. You also need to be aware that consent can be withdrawn at any time. So if your partner was enthusiastic and suddenly that enthusiasm decreases substantially to where they are no longer participating, that's a sign that consent has been withdrawn. To be clear, consent is not a lack of protest or resistance. There are instances when a person may face tonic immobility, which prevents them from resisting or protesting. That's why you need to be aware of how your partner is interacting with you. Consent cannot be assumed just because a person has a prior romantic or sexual history with another person. If someone has consented to a sexual act previously, that does not mean that their partner can continue to apply the prior consent to all sexual activities going forward. They will need to continue to obtain consent. Consent cannot be obtained by force, coercion, or threat. If someone shakes their partner and says, "I want to have sex with you," say yes, and they say yes, that is not consent. There's an element of force, or at least threat of force there. If someone is asleep, or if they've had so much alcohol that they are throwing up or passing out, they cannot consent because they are incapacitated. You need consent for all sexual activity. This includes taking or sending sexually explicit pictures or filming consensual sexual acts. If a person has consent for a sexual activity and then takes out their phone to take pictures without consulting with their partner, they have now engaged in sexual exploitation. Let's say the person has consent to take the pictures, but then decides to share the pictures with others without consulting with their partner. Again, this is sexual exploitation. Students can report any incident of sex-based discrimination to any TAMUC employee. So when faculty, staff, and student employees learn about any type of discrimination during the course and scope of their employment, they're required to share that information with the Office of Compliance so that we can reach out to the student to talk about supportive measures and the administrative process. Students can also report directly to officials with authority to institute corrective measures. One of the main ones, myself, is the Title IX coordinator. My office is located in Lewis Hall, room 130. You can also report directly to Deputy Title IX coordinators. Their names and office locations and contact information can be found in the student handbook as well as the Title IX webpage. Do be aware that that number off to the side, that's the number that will get you connected to my office. We do encourage students who have experienced or witnessed incidents of sexual harassment and sex-based misconduct to report that information to the police. For incidents that occur on campus, you can report to the University Police Department. They're also located in Lewis Hall. Do be aware that they are our employees, so when they receive notice of an incident, they will share that information with our office, the Office of Compliance. You can also, for incidents of off-campus, you can report to the local police, the Kingsville Police Department. They are not our employees, so what that means is they're not obligated to share that information with the university. So if you do want access to supportive measures in the administrative process, you do need to communicate with somebody on campus. We do have confidential reporters, so you can confidentially speak to counselors at Student Health and Wellness, and they will not share any identifiable information. You can also report to local shelters. So we have the Purple Door, and they do provide services to both male and females. And they will keep that information confidential, but do be aware that they're not affiliated with the university. And they're also a good source for advocacy. Students can also report directly to an email address, Title9, that's TitleIX @tamuc.edu. This is a very secure way to report. Within this email address, only 2 people on campus have access to the server. And so you can also report directly to the TAMUC webpage. Risk, fraud, and misconduct sexual assault/harassment hotline. This is also serving as our anonymous reporting option. You can choose to file a report with the reporter's information filled in or with the reporter's information blank. However, sometimes limited information may limit the university's ability to respond to a report of sexual misconduct. When you click on this link, you're then going to be taken to this web page, and you're going to have to, on the right, find the link that says Texas A&M University-Kingsville. Once you click on that link, it'll take you into our online reporting option. When students report sexual misconduct to the university, it may trigger an administrative process, which is essentially our investigative process. An administrative process is fair and unbiased to both parties of an investigation. When we're going through this process, we're looking just for facts and not forming any opinions. An administrative process is not advocacy. I cannot advocate for one party over another. I can, however, connect you to an advocate as one of our potential resources. The administrative process is not a criminal or civil court proceeding. UPD and KPD will handle criminal proceedings if you want to report and go through that process. The university has an administrative process which is separate and different. Students are able to have both processes going on at the same time, and one does not eliminate the need for the other. So one of the first things that happens when we receive a report of sexual misconduct is that I will connect with the student to talk about possible interim measures and resources that may be available depending on what it is that they are reporting. Some of the interim measures and resources that may be available include connecting students with free counseling at Student Health and Wellness. It's also important for our students to seek medical treatment should they need to do so, and get any forensic evidence collected if it's available. To have forensic evidence collected, it needs to be collected by a sexual assault nurse examiner, a SANE. The closest SANEs that we have are in Corpus Christi at Doctors Regional and Driscoll Children's Hospital. We understand that sometimes transportation can be an issue for our students, so one of our resources can be helping students connect with transportation to get to and from Corpus so they can get the forensic evidence collected. I also want to make a note here. Sometimes students who have experienced a sexual assault may not be ready to make a report to the police or to the university to facilitate the administrative process. They can still have a SANE exam and have the forensic evidence collected, and that way that evidence will be on hold for when they are ready to make a report. We also recognize that sometimes students on both sides of the investigation can be living in the same housing or have some of the same classes. One of our resources can be to help facilitate separating them by either switching their residence or by changing schedules around. We can also provide a discreet notice of absence for our students so that professors are aware of a nondescript reason why students may have been out of their class. We also have orders of no contact, which is a university document that tells students that they need to separate by a certain amount of distance, as well as not contact each other on or off campus. Any violations should be reported to our office, the Office of Compliance, and it may result in additional student code of conduct violations. We can also schedule accommodations. We recognize that sometimes students have schedules that overlap and they may be utilizing some of the popular amenities on campus at the same time. We can work with both parties to an investigation to try to come up with a schedule so that their schedules don't overlap. And as I said before, we can also assist with students with reporting to UPD, the University Police Department, as well as the Kingsville Police Department. And I can also assist students with connecting with other resources that are available off campus, including contacting advocacy. We do have an organization local called the Purple Door. They provide services for both male and female students. And some of the resources that they can provide include information on how to obtain protective orders, which is a court document, similar to an order of no contact but enforceable through the court system, as well as if somebody needs to break a lease in off-campus housing and switch their living arrangements, they have information on how to help with that, as well as provide information on how to obtain crime victim compensation funds. So those are some of the resources and interim measures that we can provide when we receive a report on campus. So when we get a report of sexual misconduct, which again can include sexual harassment and sex-based misconduct, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sit down with a student and talk about information on community resources, as well as what supportive measures may be applicable depending on what it is that they're reporting. We'll also talk about the administrative process, and if the student wants to sign a formal complaint, they can do so at that time. And what will happen is then we will then go to an inquiry, which can lead to a comprehensive investigations based on the actions alleged. So if there's sufficient information to go forward to an investigation, the report will then get handed over to the investigators who have been trained in Title IX investigative techniques, and they will interview the parties separately, collect their statements, collect any evidence if there is any, and interview third-party witnesses that have material information. And what they're going to do is they're going to create a report that basically has a timeline of the events and any relevant evidence as well. And so if you have evidence, things like pictures, text messages, videos, it's always a good idea to keep it and not delete it. So you can use that in an administrative process or in a criminal process, depending on your choices. So once that report is in a draft form, they will share it with the parties for review. And then they will get comments back from the parties, which they will have the ultimate decision if they're going to make any changes. And eventually there will be a final draft, sorry, not a draft, a final report. The final report will then be shared with the hearing facilitator and trigger a second 10-day review period for the parties. And the hearing facilitator will also schedule a pre-hearing conference with the parties. So at the pre-hearing conference, the facilitator will go over the hearing procedures. When we go to a hearing, there is a 3-member panel who will make the ultimate finding of an allegation, whether something is substantiated, insufficient evidence to substantiate, or unsubstantiated. If something is substantiated, there will likely be sanctions that apply, and sanctions can be anything from warning to probation, suspension, expulsion, and can also have some other components to it, like required trainings or other learning outcomes as well. And if you are curious, you can find a sanctioning matrix in the student handbook, which will tell you what different types of sanctions apply for what is being alleged. So during this entire process, both parties are allowed to have an advisor. And so that advisor during the investigative process does not have an active role. This can be any individual, a friend, a family member, an advocate, an attorney, but that individual is there for guidance and support, and they don't participate. It changes a little bit when we get to the hearing. At the pre-hearing conference, in the hearing process, what will happen is the advisor will take a more active role, and along with the hearing panel members, will question the investigators, the other party, as well as third-party witnesses on behalf of the party they're representing. At the end, after there has been a finding, and if there are any sanctions, if they have been applied, there is limited appeal available. So either party can appeal if there was material information or evidence that was suddenly became available that was not available during the investigation. They can appeal if there any member, the investigators, or any person involved in the process, if there is a perceived bias. They can appeal if there was a procedural error, or they can appeal if the sanctions are too severe or not severe enough. Before there is a finding, however, either party can also, or I should say both parties can agree to access the informal resolution process. So this is available after a formal complaint has been signed, but before a finding has been finalized. And what parties can agree to is they can agree to go into mediation, facilitation, shuttle facilitation, restorative justice, or administrative conferences. And what will happen during this process is if you can get an agreement, parties will agree to what the ultimate resolution will be. At any time during the informal resolution process, either party can decide to withdraw, and if there is a withdrawal, the formal investigation process will continue. During this entire process, retaliation is prohibited. So retaliation is essentially where somebody's trying to impact another person's access to our process. So this can also take the form of trying to get someone to change what they've said to the investigators, or putting pressure on somebody to withdraw a complaint. So if there is retaliation, it can be reported to our office, and it may result in additional student code of conduct violations. So we do have additional resources available for students. Some of those additional resources include EverFi trainings on JNet. These are online training modules. Some of those trainings include prescription drug abuse prevention, sexual assault prevention for graduate students, ongoing sexual assault prevention, alcohol EDU, which is the alcohol training that I mentioned earlier in the presentation, that has a lot of good information about how alcohol impacts the body, as well as alcohol myths. We also have some additional training that's available, including a diversity and cultural awareness training, as well as a financial wellness training. We also do bystander intervention training. It's really important that all of our students are aware of the bystander effect, which basically is this phenomenon that says that the larger the group out in public watching a situation that may unfold in relationship violence or sexual misconduct, the less likely they are to intervene and help an individual. And the reason for that is a lot of times what's happening is when they see everybody else watching the same situation, there's a person having a conversation in their head that says, probably not the best person to intervene. Or if one of these other people that I can see watching the same thing, if they haven't intervened already, I bet you they're going to intervene soon. So I don't need to. It's called a diffusion of responsibility. And so what they don't realize is that everybody else is having the same conversation, and the end result is, in a lot of cases, nobody helps. And we do want to equip our students with this knowledge so that we can increase their likelihood that they are going to help in these situations, as well as provide them tools of how they can help effectively, whether it be through direct intervention, which is going up to somebody and say, you need to stop, because it's not going to lead anywhere good. Or if you're not comfortable with direct intervention, you can use delegation, which is where you recruit friends or maybe authority figures such as officers from the University Police Department, or the bartender or bouncer if you're out at a restaurant or a club. The other intervention technique that you can utilize is distraction. So let's say that there's a situation that's unfolding and you want to separate two people, but you don't want to draw attention to the situation. You can create up a distraction to separate the two people, and that way you can make sure that they go home safely. So distraction can include, maybe you can make up something traumatic happen, so you go over to one of the individuals and say, I really need to talk to you right now. Or you can say, hey, somebody's lights are on in the parking lot. You need to go check on your car. The ultimate goal there, as I said, is to separate them so that any of these red flags that are going off can stop. Again, the ultimate goal here is we want our students to be comfortable helping other students on campus so that way everybody can go home safely. We also partner, by we I mean the Office of Compliance, partners with the University Police Department to have self-defense classes each semester. So these classes are currently only available to female faculty, staff, and students. And there's a basic self-defense class and there's a keychain self-defense class. And we'll have one of each semester. You do need to take the basic class before you can take the keychain self-defense class. And I'll have more information on when these classes will be scheduled at a later date. So pay attention to some of the announcements and flyers on campus. We also have a really good app called Rave Guardian. When you download Rave Guardian and you put in your email address, it's going to change to HaveGuard app. Now this app has a really cool feature. Not only does it connect you directly to UPD if you do need to report something or if you're in an emergency situation, but it has a timer feature on it. So what happens is, let's say you need to walk from point A to point B on campus and you know about how long it's going to take you to get there. You can set the timer and you can select a guardian. Now your guardian does not have to be anybody on campus. It can be a family member, and they don't have to be in Kingsville. What will happen is, if you don't make it to point B, or if you don't turn off the timer, it will ultimately alert your guardian as well as the University Police Department that something is going on and they need to get in touch with you. And if they can't get in touch with you, what will happen is the University Police Department will be able to track your cell phone using GPS. There's also another app called Reach Out Captivation. This app just has a lot of information about resources on campus, off campus, collected, and gives you contact information all in one convenient app. Now, I did mention earlier that we have EverFi training on JNet. So this is just a screenshot of what JNet looks like. We're on the Campus Resources tab, and at the very bottom right, what you're going to see, those are all of the trainings that are available. Now you're going to see, and it's kind of a little hard to see right now, but some of those trainings have little asterisks next to them. Those are required trainings. So the required trainings include Alcohol EDU. Now I do want to be clear on Alcohol EDU. It's only going to be required if you're enrolled in UNIV, and it's enforced through grading. For all of our new incoming transfer undergraduate students, you're required to take sexual assault prevention for undergraduates. This provides details on healthy relationships, bystander intervention, etc. This is, like I said, it's required. You do need to take it during your first semester with us, and you do need to get a 70% or better on the quiz. Now, if you don't take it by October 26th, there will be a registration hold put on your account that will prevent you from registering for your spring 2021 courses. And I cannot take that hold off until you've completed the training and gotten a 70% better. If you're a transfer student and you've already taken the training at another university, you still need to take this training because it's state law that you have to take it within your first semester with us. There's also sexual assault prevention for student athletes. So if you're a student athlete, the NCAA requires annual sexual violence prevention training. So you will have to take this course as well. This is an annual course, which means you have to take it every year. And again, you have to take this before priority registration on October 26th, or there will be a registration hold placed on your account preventing you from registering for your spring 2021 courses. And again, I cannot take this hold off until you've completed the course. Students who are pregnant may also have access to resources through the Office of Compliance. So students who miss class due to medically necessary absences relating to their pregnancy must be provided a chance to make up missed coursework or course credit. Absences are also included here. So let's say if your professor says that you can only be absent 3 times in the syllabus, and one of your absences is because it's medically necessary and related to your pregnancy, that absence should not count. Now, when you're looking at what type of arrangements will be made to make up the coursework, there's a couple of things that go into play here. First, the professor ultimately has the final decision of what those alternative arrangements will be because they have to protect the integrity of the course. Now, of course, they will take into account input from the student. The professor also needs to provide enough time for students to complete that alternative arrangement, and that alternative arrangement should not begin until the student is back from their medically necessary absence. It's really important that you keep your professors up to date with anything going on with your pregnancy, and you communicate with them if absences are about to occur, because limited communication may limit the alternative arrangements that are available. The end result, if there's not a lot of communication and there were a lot of absences, ultimately it may result in an I contract, which is incomplete, whereas before they may have been able to change out one assignment or another assignment with a writing assessment. Generally speaking, our professors are really good about making arrangements for our students, but if there's any questions or if you want to make sure that we're formally going through the process, you can schedule a meeting at the Office of Compliance, and we can assist you with making arrangements if you have any concerns. Now, the last thing that I'm going to mention is I do want to provide one social media warning. About a year ago, we had a blackmail scam that hit the campus, and what was happening is students were communicating with individuals that they'd never met in real life, and that individual was asking them to send sensitive pictures or videos, and then they were threatening to blackmail them by posting them on social media if they didn't provide them with money. So it's really important that you know who you're sending these images to, and it's also a good idea if you are sending these images not to put any identifiable information in the images, like your face or maybe any identifiable marks. If you have any concerns, you can report them directly to the University Police Department. So that was the Title IX presentation of resources available at Texas A&M University-Kingsville. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to find me at Lewis Hall, which is the same building as the University Police Department, and Suite 130 in the Office of Compliance. You can also contact me through email, or through, you can call me at 361-593-4758. And I've also included a link down there to our Title IX website, which can also provide you with additional information. Again, thank you so much for your time, and welcome to Javelina Nation.